Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my podcast, From All English. In this podcast, I discuss some of the most sensitive subjects in today's society, and in this podcast, we will discuss racial inequality, police brutality, and systemic racism. And to be with me here today is Carlos Carter.
Thank you so much, Samuel. It's an honor to be on your podcast discussing this very important topic. So thank you very much for having me.
Okay, and before we speak, Carlos, we just need to briefly set the stage. Your niece Star is a teenage girl who witnesses the fatal shooting of a childhood friend, Khalil, by a police officer during a routine traffic stop. This tragic event sends shockwaves through a community called Garden Heights and beyond. We need to address the complex interplay of identity, activism, and the justice system. Garden Heights, where Star and her family lived, is a predominantly black neighborhood struggling with high crime rates, poverty, and strained relations with the police. And this story shows how deeply racial inequality and discrimination are woven into everyday life. It's also a mirror of many real-world incidents that have fueled movements for change, most prominently the Black Lives Matters. Carlos, let's start by discussing your perspective on the racial problems portrayed in your niece Star's case. You serve in law enforcement, but you're also a member of the black community. How do you see the issues, and what does that dual identity mean for you?
Thanks, Samuel. That's a harsh one to start with, but it's, again, great to be here. Being a black police officer in a neighborhood like Garden Heights can be pretty complicated. On one hand, I'm sworn to uphold the law, to protect and to serve. But on the other hand, I have personally felt the sting of racial profiling, both in my own life and in witnessing how my community is treated. There is these systematic issues where black communities often don't trust the police because they have seen officers abuse their power or use unnecessary force in some cases. It's tough because so many officers do join the force to do good, me for example, but the institutional practices in place sometimes make it hard to break down these stereotypes or hold problematic officers accountable for their not okay actions. So I do feel the tension of trying to be loyal to the job while also supporting my family and the community I live in, especially when they feel targeted or unheard. It's like balancing act that comes with a lot of emotional conflict.
Okay. Your niece Star was present when Khalil was shot, right?
Yes, sadly, indeed she was.
Yeah, and you as her uncle and also a member of the police must have felt torn. If you are comfortable, what was going on with you when you heard Khalil had been killed?
It's a hard one. I still feel it today, but I remember that night vividly. I was off duty, but still had my badge on me, like I often do. I got a call from a family member telling me Star had witnessed something tragic. It turned out to be Khalil's death, something unimaginable. In that moment, I was just worried sick about Star, wondering if she was safe and how she was coping. She's young, and to see her friend killed like that can be life-altering. Sadly, that is not the first time she's witnessed this. But from my law enforcement background, I tried to piece together the facts, the circumstances of the stop, the officer's justification, if any, and the immediate aftermath. But as her uncle, I was angry, heartbroken. I knew Khalil wasn't armed, and hearing about how quickly things escalated made me question everything I'd been taught about proper police procedure. It felt like my two worlds, the police force and my family, were colliding in the worst possible way in those seconds.
And that collision must have been overwhelming. So moving forward, a significant part of the story is about whether Khalil's shooter will be held accountable or not. And what do you personally hope happens with the trial? Looking further ahead, what change do you want to see in the future?
Ideally, I want justice for Khalil. I want justice for everybody experiencing these actions. His life mattered. He wasn't just another statistic. But I also know the legal system can be slow to change. Sometimes it feels like the odds are stacked against families like ours. We seek accountability from the police. I hope that by bringing Khalil's story to light, more people see these systemic flaws and become motivated to push for reforms. On the long term, I'd like to see better training for officers, especially around de-escalation and recognizing these implicit biases. We need to build real relationships between the police and our communities. When there's mutual respect and understanding, the world will be a safer place. That might mean hosting community events, fostering open dialogues, and holding officers accountable when things go wrong, as they did that night. If we can achieve that, we might start to rebuild trust and see lasting change, but it will take time.
Yeah, thank you, Carlos. Let's broaden the conversation a bit and talk about institutional racism as it appears in Star's case. One example is how Khalil was treated as a suspect from the moment the traffic stop happened. Another is the way Star felt silent and she had to wrestle with the fear of speaking up against police officers because of the social and legal structures that tend to protect law enforcement over civilian accountants. Some might say these are isolated incidents, but the truth is they point to a bigger, long-standing pattern. How do you see institutional racism affecting day-to-day life in places like Garden Heights?
Big question, but you're right. These problems aren't isolated. Institutional racism shows up in school systems that lack funding in predominantly black neighborhoods. It appears in housing policies that keep communities segregated. It seeps into the justice system where black defendants often receive harsher sentences. Even well-intentioned individuals can be part of a larger structure that is biased, like a police department that's never reviewed its policies, or the district attorney's office that rarely prosecutes officers. To fix this, we need transparency and we need education. Officers should receive continuous training on cultural sensitivity and de-escalation, as I said before. We also need a broader reforms at the city and state levels, like independent review boards that investigate police misconduct. But beyond all of that, each person in a position of authority has to be willing to look in the mirror and ask, am I a part of the problem or am I a part of the solution to the problem?
Absolutely. It's a collective effort. Community policing, implicit bias training, and open forums where people can speak freely and hold officials accountable. If we integrate those practices, we stand a better chance of dismantling the type of prejudices that led to Khalil's death and the injustice we see around us. Carlos, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights. Let's hope conversations like these can spark meaningful actions and help us move toward equity and justice. To our listeners, we appreciate you tuning in. We encourage you to learn more about these issues, whether through Star's case or by following real-world activism in your own communities. Until next time, stay informed, stay compassionate, and remember that every voice can make a difference.